What's interesting looking at your pathology project draft made me think of
Yeah.
infographic versus a presentation style. I think next semester I'm going to start implementing more infographic type.
So yeah, so one of the things I worked on this weekend that I wanted to, talk about was I I moved it into Google Slides. So I'm working with Hannah and
Mm-hmm.
Juritsky, and so Hannah made a Google Slide doc. So now I've moved it in there, and so now I can edit it, like do your edits in there, like what you said about, make bullet points, not sentences. There's the other dog. Shh, puppy,
Oh,
puppy. Um, and
don't worry. We got our pooches. They love
yeah,
it.
she's only 2. We got her in COVID, and she's still needs some training. um, but yes, so now I have to figure out how to do the voiceover, but
Well, the
Hannah,
idea on that is, and I want to, well, we started doing that on Zoom once we got into the pandemic. And so ideally, what I found is to be on Zoom as the group and then share your slides and record it that way. Have you done that before? Or what were you thinking? Let's see what you were thinking.
well, I have to say I was going to defer to Hannah since she's more technologically knowledgeable. So she said, like, let's put it in the slides now, and then once we have all the final slides done, then we can do the voiceover.
Right.
But you just want it recorded, right? So each of us, like when you do your lectures, I usually watch when you do the voiceover to the slides, not the classroom ones. So that's what you want this to look like, right? Like each on the
Yeah.
screen.
Like a little movie.
Slide.
Like it's a little
Yeah.
movie, right?
Okay.
The challenge is if we do some are recording the voice onto the slides. I don't want that because
Yeah.
it's very difficult to watch when you then watch other students or other
Okay.
peers. So
Okay.
what I want is the group makes one voiceover video.
Okay.
Or or what the other thing that we were thinking is the ones who want to present in class, we can do them in class on Mondays as well, if people can come to class, because that's
Yeah.
obviously more natural format. But
Yeah.
I think ideally we have a video of the group that's what about 6 to 10 minutes long ish,
Okay.
whole thing, not
The
each
total. Okay. Yeah.
total. So
Yeah.
2 to 3 minutes a piece.
Yeah.
And so a little rehearsing, I think, is usually helpful to
Yes.
make sure I outlined that I'm thinking about 6 to 8 points per minute of what you can convey in a video. Like it's 1 in 5 people, maybe 12
Okay.
points, depending, right? So
Okay.
as a guide in reviewing them, I wrote about 20 to 30 bullet point type information pieces. Then hopefully, not necessarily every one of them visualized with a picture, but whatever we can visualize with pictures just makes it so much easier to talk about and then to be absorbed by the viewer other than just a word.
Okay.
And so
That
then
makes
that sort of
sense.
uh-huh.
So 20, I'm just writing this down, 20 to 30.
Yeah, and I put it in the comment section on the things on everybody's
Oh, okay.
part
Okay.
of part of
All
the
right.
generic comments that I gave. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
As I'm thinking about these things as we go along.
Yeah.
The way this project came about was when a student came in missing a test, having to take the kid to the ER for asthma attack, and when I asked
Mm.
the ER do? They said, well, I only gave no, it didn't say only. That's what I said. He said he gave me a albuterol. And I'm like, well, did they also talk to you about some lifestyle stuff? Because, there's a big connection there.
Yeah.
No, they didn't. And I'm assuming it's just a time problem. But then I also realized we got to work on that, or we can work on that. And so that's when it started. So the goal is to convey the information is a little bit of a video. Originally, it was actually a brochure that we could give everybody. So people have a brochure in their hands. They're like, hey, look, for example, on the phone, then Microsoft had a product.
Yeah.
Okay. Brochures, but this was called Faith. And I don't think they continued it. I'm not sure. It was really cool, actually.
Yeah.
Presentation thing. But so that's how the evolution is kind of going. That's why I'm also moving towards infographic, because I'm like, hey, look, then we can have it in pictures again. Like, it's easy,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Information, because we have to. One of my missions is to educate as many people about making medical decisions. And so if we know more, we can talk to people more. Information, it's sweet at the end of the day.
Yeah. And that's the section I took. Even before we picked the topic, I said I wanted to do the third question, which is, alternative and lifestyle changes. So it's been good. It's been good.
To make a point for also the ones who watch the recording is you're bringing your personal example into your discussion.
Yep.
That's the golden ticket. If you put something that people can relate to into the overall way of talking about it, and you got the audience captive, and you also go with that. I almost gave everybody that speech thing to watch, a great talk. What are the elements of a great talk? But it seems a bit out of touch somewhat. But it's still like what could be and what is. Like Steve Jobs, this world of regular dial-up telephones, and look what we could have. And it's sort of the same thing. It's like, this disease or whatever can be debilitating, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah.
And for example, with arthritis, I see that daily with my patients. Daily. And it's just, it's more a factor, not everybody wants this kind of work, but, if you're into this kind of stuff, then it's more a factor, do you do it or you're not doing it? It's the factor of suffering or not suffering. It's not a fait accompli.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. It's been very interesting. I've definitely enjoyed the research part.
Good.
Yeah.
No, then it's just, as soon as, then the next step here is, I don't quite know the date line. I think it's this 2 weeks and then we want it out, or 2 or 3 weeks or something. Well, let me look real quick.
Yeah, I think
so this
it was
week,
another Sunday. I think it wasn't this Sunday, but the Sunday after Thanksgiving, I think.
Yeah, the 26th. I got the 26th. So we have it. If we do the 26th, we have the video presentation. And then after that, we do a sharing of the presentations with each other, like a discussion thing. And then, and so we have these 2 weeks to now, from the first sort of thought and draft research to have that presentation be optimized a little bit with some of those points. Yeah, the sentences kind of out, extract the important words, visualize it with pictures, bring in a personal story. About 20 30 points. I think some of those things will help a lot to create something that's also not that hard to present. That's the other thing.
Yeah. And so if somebody does not present their project in class, do you then circulate other people's projects so like we can see what other people have done? I mean, just for
the one in class will be recorded by video.
Oh, okay. So then we can go back and watch the video.
Okay. But the process is everybody will have a video.
Okay.
Presentation in class, I'll just make the video or somebody else and we'll put it up that way.
I see.
But it's just in person. Like last semester, I had 2 deaf students.
Wow.
Oh, I should send you that. Yeah, we did a video with interpreters. And so we had to be in class. It would be too complicated.
Nice. Wow. That's
awesome. Sign language and then the interpreter speaking. Yeah, I'll find it. It's on my YouTube. I have it on the YouTube. Because that was really cool. And it
Yeah.
was tough doing it too, because it's a lot of us who have disabilities are not necessarily integrated in the same way in society. It's some fundamental thing like hearing or speaking. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool. But yeah, everybody at the end will then look at 2 or 3 other groups' videos that interest them, and then the point there at that point is to learn what did I learn from it, and then give some feedback. Like, hey, what can we make better next time? And then I talk a little bit about the sandwich, the positive way of giving feedback. The first sentence is you praise the product of somebody, because you have most of the time there's some real good stuff in what people do. And then you say, look, this, and you praise the person as you critique the product, not the person, right? So maybe speaking a little slower will make it easier to be absorbed. I don't know. One for me usually, And then at the third part is like help them how to make it better. Basically, okay, you speak too fast, maybe slowing it down a little bit and temper it a little bit. Right?
That's so interesting. I've never heard it kind of put as a sandwich, and you can see how talking to your kids, you can use those same guidelines.
Oh yeah. I learned it. I have a review. I'm a reviewer for online classes for California.
Oh.
I got that badge through whatever. I don't know. It was some education thing. But that's where we heavily talk about how to critique somebody's class.
Okay, nice.
How they can hear the critique versus just like, it's a very delicate thing,
Yeah.
So we can hopefully learn a little bit about that too at the last discussion. It's good to know that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Good.
So yeah, is that helpful, or anybody else?
Yes.
Now more people. Questions come up. Vinny and Co. Bearcat.
I have a question because so ours. It's funny because I was interested, like you, Andrea, about the answering the third part, because our project's on diabetes and I live it. But as I was doing this research, I found the medicine part really interesting because there are so many ways to treat because of the different target organs. And I'm like, oh, so now I see the process my doctor was thinking, let's start the cheapest way and the most, I guess, what has been effective is metformin. And that's how they started me. But I'm like, as I'm reading, I'm thinking, maybe my problem is not the glucose, but this other thing called incretin that I found out about. And I'm like, what if you want to focus on a little bit of that? And, because I know we have certain parts of the question to answer, but that to me was very intriguing.
Well, then you got to maybe expand it a little, because that's very, very important, because, you're already now going into subtleties of your own way of it being approached that you as a patient can make can help the situation, even on that. And the third question, I think, in reality, how it got created was really from the perspective of what can I do proactively or whatever or reactively too, as a patient, to help me the most possible way to get this thing, because part of with medicine is, the way it's not individually with every doctor, but as a whole structure. It's a diabetes medical industrial complex, for example, or because the pharma has these medicines they make, and everybody makes a little money along the way, and it's not intentionally negatively thought, but ultimately we create these ways, these pathways of doing things. And it's very important for us individuals to know, as you say, Vinny, and that's why you should work on that too, or maybe more on that. That's cool. To be helping us to get more and more subtle with these kind of.
So it doesn't have to be hard and fast that we have to stay. Okay.
No. I want to have you, if you have a pathway that goes down, that really goes and is not sitting on the couch not doing anything pathway, I'm totally into it. Absolutely. Because that's how I work. If I have an idea, like with the booklets, that was a dream I woke up with. And then I was like, I just got to try to do it and see if it happens. And it turned out to be a good thing, because people seem to generally like that little more format of versus a big textbook and stuff like that. So yeah, go with your flow, go with your brain, with your gut on that. That's good.
Yeah.
Very
Speaking of brain, I had a difficult time with the brain.
well. Should we transition into the brain?
Any other questions? I didn't want to hijack.
I think we got the path stuff pretty good understood, or at least forward moved a little bit. Yeah, let's go a little bit into the brain. Do you have any things you want to guide us in how we talk about it for a moment there, Vinny?
Well, I when I was doing the coloring, I felt like, gosh, this could be so many things. I think it was the sagittal cut? With the one with all the labels. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's what? And I think what I'm really puzzled about is the oculi. I know it's above the cerebellum, but can you point that out?
Yeah, the colliculi stuff.
Colliculi, yeah, not oculi, colliculi.
I know. I'm like, wait a minute. What did I drink this morning?
Yeah, no.
Confused in my head.
And just to add to the coloring thing, for me, I thought the coloring thing was hard too. And actually, the piece where it showed just like the brain stem, I didn't end up adding anything to that. So I'm like, wait, shoot. Was it here? And I should add something. So yeah, I found the coloring a little more tricky.
Oh, yes. And the pyramid. If you could show me the pyramid too. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I only found the olive.
Yeah, the olive's cool.
I'm glad somebody else felt that way.
Well, make sure. I could probably go back and look for better pictures now. I did this about 5-6 years ago. They always improve on things. If you think that's a problem. But let's go to the pyramid stuff. Let me see, where are we at? Here we go with the forebrain. Well, let's go through the slide and then we'll catch it. So since it's all sort of, and some of the stuff in the brain is just tiny, it's unbelievably tiny, and it's just an area versus we can really see the individual cells and stuff. Did you guys understand the insula lobe?
Yes.
That was all right?
Yeah.
And so the lobes, the cool thing about the lobes is that they're pretty much named after the bones that are on top of them.
Right.
And except for the insula. And then in the lobe department, I just basically go, frontal lobe kind of speaks for that, et cetera, et cetera. That was pretty all right. That's fairly linear, right?
Yeah.
And then the cool thing here is the homunculi. Did you guys get that? How that's what that is? This stuff? Okay, let's do that, because this is really the cool stuff. Because when you look at, you have two main things. You got information in and information out. One, the frontal cortex is the information out going to the muscles, telling the muscle what to do and where to do what. And so that last nerve impulse that shoots down which muscle to contract and what to do what. And again, that's even way too simplistic. So if you're here, but it's really cool. It's right here in the primary motor area, right here by this, between the frontal and the parietal lobe. If you look at the brain, this is the front side, this is the back side. And so that area here, the primary motor area, is structurally on a gyrus, which is a structure, the wiggle, and it's on that wiggle that's called the precentral gyrus. And that's right in front of this central sulcus that we have here. This separation between the frontal and the parietal lobe is known as a central sulcus. And it's just a groove. It's not really, if you look at the brain, we're going to do that in the lab next week. We're not going to go this week, but next Monday we're going to go, because we're also going to do the eyeball. But if you look at it on the brain, you can't really tell it's really something going down. It's just an area, really, one of the wiggle things. But the cool thing about this precentral gyrus, when they actually take that wiggle and map it out, it looks like this. And they cut it, front to back cut. And it looks like that. And you see along the line, you can map out where what body part is located and where the nerves for moving muscles in that body part come from. So that's pretty cool, I think. And that work is homunculus. This is a homunculus. And then they make claymations out, and this is a claymation of now, not the motor one, but there is one that's right behind that central sulcus here, and it's known as the primary sensory area, which is the region, and as a structure now, it's the post central gyrus here, because it's right behind that central sulcus, and the central is the word here. And so that one is the blue wiggle. That's where we feel. If I touch my thumb, and this is actually even more interesting than the first one. If I touch my thumb here, I am very, very can delicately feel what's going on with my thumb. And when you look at the brain, where I feel that, where the sensation goes in, is right here on that part of that wiggle, that post-central gyrus, because see here, that represents the thumb. And you see the thumb is pretty big compared to like the whole arm, for example, or the whole back, for example. So that tells you that representation-wise, the thumb has many more nerve endings than the back does that feel touch and temperature and things coming into the system. These general sensations is what this specifically is. This is not the eyeball, for example. And what's interesting with that is, for example, if I massage a patient on the back, look at the back, has very few sensation receptors than the thumb comparatively, or the hand, or other parts. When I massage a back, I can spread my fingers out and massage a really wide area of the back to make the patient feel really like, oh, he's really massaging my whole back, because they don't feel what's in between the fingers, because there's not enough nerve endings, and the body thinks it's all one connection and one touch. And so that's what you can read from this thing. So that's kind of cool, I think. Does that make sense?
So are you looking at like when you're saying the nerves, are you looking at like how deep some of these go? Like the eye, for instance, there's that wiggle that goes kind of almost halfway through. Yeah.
No, that's they should probably put it down and back up. I do not know that, actually. I do not know that. I must think the way it's the representatives that the whole thing is spread out that way, because you can see it here when they do the claymation. The eye will be a much bigger portion of the forehead than it is.
Oh,
so
okay.
That's maybe a little way that they graphically put it together. So
yeah, I don't understand that claymation.
Right. Yeah. Keep ask questions so we can figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, other than it being a little creepy, is it kind of like showing proportionally?
Yes, it's showing proportionally how many nerve endings, what the concentration of nerve endings is in the different body parts.
Okay.
So it proportionally shows that the arm has many less nerve endings happening than the hand. And that makes sense, right? Because you can put your hand into the pocket and distinguish between a dime and a quarter or a penny. And if you put that thing on your arm and try to feel, well, you couldn't do that. Or put it on the back, you really can't tell. And
that's interesting.
For that.
Yeah. That and I remember makes sense. Now that makes sense to me now, because like if you watch babies, that's how they put stuff in their mouth or they touch stuff, they're like, I guess they're trying to figure out their world.
I mean, look at the lips, huge. Huge.
Oh.
That's why you want to, kiss your loved ones. I mean, it's very nurturing to the thing, because the thing is to like deep touch, as we know with autistic kids, with the heavy blankets. deep touch,
Ah.
or not just autistic kids, but there we really see it. That lets that gives us comfort, right? And the bigger this area is, the more also deep touch nerve sensors we have, for example, these receptors here. And so we can definitely extrapolate from this kind of stuff. Yeah. It's very interesting. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah. I remember reading a book where they were doing brain surgery with a local anesthetic. So like the surgeon could touch a part of the brain and then they'd say, or that's my leg, or yeah. So
and they do brain surgery with, they don't use metal knives, they use plastic stuff. It's so soft in there. It's very, very, I've seen videos too where they do that. It's pretty interesting, and it's one of the places where we can sort of understand the brain, that, because that's sort of my main message always, is the brain is partly, it just has to be so complicated, because think about the brain, studying the brain, that's very difficult, studying itself, and so it's just, some of it is just complicated. But so if we got that.
Wait, sorry, this is, maybe you don't know. So where on the brain do you touch it and then you feel it in the brain? Like if you
don't. The brain doesn't have those nerve endings. The brain doesn't feel pain, for example.
Really?
When you have a headache, it's not the brain that hurts. It's the other stuff that hurts.
Huh.
The brain matter itself does not feel pain.
Wow.
Well, to my knowledge, you always have to give me the caveat that I'm trying to learn all these things and some of it change, right? The knowledge changes. So that, of course, there's always a caveat to that. But generally speaking, the brain is not, it doesn't have those sensors. So it doesn't need to be represented, because the brain is in the skull. You don't need to have a pressure fiber on the brain.
Huh.
You want to have a pressure fiber on your scalp. So something going on outside, because why do you need a pressure fiber? You're gonna for sure make sure if something crushes you and presses you hard, you got to get away from that, right? You think those kind of ways when you think this sort of fundamental neurology. You think, heat. Oh, I need to run away from the hot. The stove. I need to take it away, or something like that.
Because I get migraine headaches sometimes, and I swear it's like deep in the middle of my brain, the pain. But I guess that's just the sensor.
Well, even migraines, a lot of migraine stuff, even migraine as the other headaches, is a lot to do with the muscle and bone stuff in the neck.
Yeah.
It has to do with that. And my migraines, of course, are also very unique with their onset and their triggers, but that is still also often a trigger.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And then what's also kind of interesting, if we go further, we have then association areas, not just these primary areas that we just talked about, where we execute a stimuli to a muscle going out, or where it comes in, like the sensation, the post-central gyrus. But now we also have association areas, and those are integration areas, and they're usually around those primaries. So here the pre-central gyrus is in yellowish gray, and then in front of that we have the association areas, and those are areas of processing to then come up with the idea that, we gotta go walk over there to turn the light on because it's dark. That stuff happens somewhere around the whole brain. And then the last thing is, we got to start using that muscle. That happens in the primary area. Or as a sensation comes in, that something poked me here, happens right here in the primary sensory area. The interpretation of what the heck is that going to mean happens in the association area. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good. So that's another place where it's like fundamentally I can kind of understand the brain a little bit. Because, for me, like right now, I'm listening to this podcast with this neuroscientist and the sports psychologist, and they're talking. It's very interesting stuff. I mean, apparently you can take Tylenol and it doesn't only help physical pain, it also helps emotional pain, for example. Like, really interesting. And so I want us to get to those places where these things are interesting to understand, you know. And then, because we have there's a lot of good stuff out there. So if we understand somewhat of the foundation of how this stuff works, then we have a framework to listen in and get more knowledge. Brain is very cool stuff. All right, so then from there we go into the insula, which is that last lobe. Again, that's still sort of what lobe does what mostly. And then we get into the basal ganglia. That's an interesting place too. The basal ganglia is where we do repetitive motions. So when I actually say, you know, oh, the light is dark, the room is dark, we got to turn on the light, let's walk to the light switch. All of that happens in the frontal cortex. But then the frontal cortex probably ends up with, in reality, shooting down that we got to move to the light switch and move these muscles. And then the basal ganglia says like, oh yeah, I know how to walk. I can walk all automatic. You don't have to think about it anymore. And then it walks to the light switch. Now, if we take that further, we can go to playing piano or driving a car. You know, the first time you driven a car was really, really concentration was really strong, and you couldn't read the paper, do the makeup, drink the coffee, eat the breakfast, which you shouldn't, but you sometimes do anyway. But that's because the basal ganglia learns how these repetitive motion patterns are used, and then it can just automatically do them. And that happens in this area. That's in the deep part of the brain here. As the not totally sure where the precentral gyrus would be, but somewhere up here, sends this information down to the spinal cord, to the body, to then get to the muscles. It bypasses the basal ganglia, which can pick up the motion pattern that are repetitive. And again, that happens like you playing the piano. You know, the pieces get easier. Those are then stored motions in the basal ganglia. And that's why you want to learn something good the first time, because practice makes permanent, not perfect. So that's an important thing there. And I was just listening to another podcast with Michaela Schifrin, who is, after Serena Williams retired, she's now sort of the next great female athletes in the starting holes. She's the best skier ever that we've had. And she's only 28. And one of the things that she talked about, her parents, because she's from Colorado, so she learned how to ski when she was like, 2 or so. So I don't have an excuse why I wasn't a ski star. But she said her parents taught her properly from the start, and she thinks that was a really, really important factor, that early on she was able to then progress from that place into more perfection. So anyway, that's kind of a cool structure to know, the basal ganglia. This is also interesting, this word ganglia. Sometimes you read it as basal nuclei, because nuclei, the definition of nuclei in this situation, neurology, is a cluster of cell bodies inside the central nervous system, which is the brain or the spinal cord. And the definition of ganglia is a cluster of cell bodies outside of the brain or the spinal cord, in the peripheral nervous system. So this terminology is actually in modern times is getting slowly more adapted, and it's gonna, some books say basal nuclei instead of basal ganglia. So that's just, it's semantics, but it's, a lot of people do anatomy, so ultimately these things change. And then we have just a couple more. Well, the interesting thing here is actually the limbic system. Where is that? Did you guys get the limbic system?
Yeah.
What's important about that?
Where's that?
So that the limbic system is your emotional brain. Yes. So that's an important part of your brain, because, we're emotional beings, right? And that's straightly tied to the nose, to the smelling. And that's from the evolution, from the old, a lot of animals differentiate between danger and non-danger by smelling, or they detect danger by smelling, at least. And so we have a structure in here that's very important, or many of them, but one thing that's important in the limbic system is this danger situation, when we feel danger. And that is a recognition of angry or fearful things or dangerous things is in a place called the amygdala. And when the amygdala gets overreactive, then we have a temper tantrum, and then we, in the worst case scenario, do some really stupid shit. So sorry to say it like that, but that's the amygdala hijack. And so that's a place, it's very valid, right? But we often overreact in that. And so that's one of those places where we can try to work our way through and decrease the reactivity a little bit. And I think this picture shows this, but I have to go through it again. But one of, the ways of deep breathing, for example, of like calming ourselves down when we have one of those moments of like, oh my God, this is just, I'm getting road rage going on right now. And bringing the thought away from the unconscious more into the conscious place of the brain, and then make a conscious decision of what we're doing versus be a reactive decision. And I mean, that can be and is this difference between life and death in a lot of, unfortunate situations. And a lot of, situations that are having to do with anger have to do with the amygdala or anger outbursts. And so that's a good place to know too. And another thing in the limbic system that I find very important is that we learn in the limbic system. So memory is created in the limbic system, which is why it is very hard to be able to focus and concentrate when you're emotionally distressed. And so that's, I think, one of the important things to understand there. And then we get into the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is really our place where we connect the mental with the physical kind of thing. So we have a lot of things happen in the hypothalamus. So that's where we talk about psychosomatic illness. Psycho means the psyche, the brain, the feelings and all that. I would include the heart in there, that we haven't, I think, fully understand all of that connection. And then soma means body as a term. So psychosomatic illness means, if we're always constantly stressed, we're gonna get high blood pressure. We just worked on that with the salt a little bit too when we read that. And that's what that means. So that's why it's helpful in our society or in our life that is very sympathetically driven and overstimulated to also take time to reflect and meditate or go outside and calm that nervous system down a little bit. Also, though, the other thing that we have to be very careful and mindful about is the term somatopsychic pain or illness. And so that can also be that if you have pain, we know that long-term pain makes you depressed. So the body, what's going on in the body also has an influence on what's happening in the mind. So we want to be mindful of that. And, especially because medicine hasn't always recognized those things as strongly as I think they are, or they're doing now at least. And then from there, we go into the thalamus. And the thalamus is a place where we filter sensory information coming in from the body. So the one we don't is the smell. The smell goes straight to the limbic system, but pretty much everything else goes into the thalamus, where it's been understood crudely. That's why I put this pixelated picture in there. It's like the brain already sort of consciousness gets to understand it a little bit. So like we get to understand this is probably a guy, but who knows, right, from a face. Yet, but that's the thalamus understanding, and then from there the thalamus relays the information to the different parts of the brain. So the visual will go to the occiput part, occipital lobe, etc. And so that's the cool part about the thalamus, is this relay station. Look, and it's right. So if you shave a brain in half, sagittal section, brainstem here, front here, hypothalamus, and all these little clusters here, crazy amount of stuff. Of course, they're not that color in the brain. They're just no color, but they have to somehow figure out. It's very delicate in there. And then this is the thalamus area here, this round thing. And then this up here, this round thing up here is where the basal ganglion is going to be at. All right, and then from there, we talk briefly about the CSF. How did you understand that conversation? Was that all right for you guys? Easy enough, or should we go through that?
You can go through it.
Okay. So the brain needs to, one of the best ways to understand why we have this CSF sort of stuff, which helps, nurtures the brain and feeds the brain, is because the brain is so soft that gravity will squish it. And the brain needs to be swimming in water, like in a pool of water. And so the best way we can make a pool of water is by having it surrounded by liquid, and inside we also have liquid. So it's like buoyant. It's like in water and liquid. That's why you don't want to shake it too much. Like, that's a precaution, shaking it too much. And that's when they get these, football players get these, I forgot what the term is, but these problems long-term, the CTEs, over time, because when you shake the brain, it wiggles around. And actually, apparently what happens is it pulls the brain away from sort of the connections to the wall of the skull on the inside. And that creates some of the damage, apparently. So I have to read more into it, but it's interesting. They made a good movie with about that. And so that's one reason why we have the CSF, right? It's so important. And so it gets secreted from the blood, and it gets secreted through these cells that squeeze it from the blood into these internal chambers. And a lot of these internal chambers are around here, around the thalamus. And then there is these horns that go through the skull. When we look at the skull in the class, the plastic skull don't seem to fit quite together. And that's because it has spaces for the CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, called CSF, that surrounds the brain and, again, nurtures the brain from the inside out. And then it goes down to the brain stem, and then behind the brain has these different little chambers and these different little names. Down here, you can see it visualized this way. So it goes from a lateral ventricle to a third ventricle to a cerebral aqueduct to a fourth ventricle, which is right in front of the cerebellum. And then it goes all the way down the spinal cord on the inside. And it squeezes out through channels. A lot of them are right back in here, behind on the bottom here. And it squeezes out and surrounds then the brain and the spinal cord as well. And so that makes it that buoyancy. And then from there, it squeezes and seeps into the tissues, largely through the sleeves that the spinal nerves come out. That's one place where it comes out. And so it's this sort of hydraulic system. It gets made and then it squeezes through, and it actually has a rhythm to it. So actually, when you look at the craniosacral therapy, for example, which is really cool stuff, that works with a rhythm called the cerebrospinal rhythm, I think. I forgot now. But it's a pumping sort of rhythm that has about 12 cycles per minute. And you've got to be very sensitive and meditative and all that to feel it. But I can feel it. I never thought I could, but now I know I can because it's that sensitive. But it does work that way. So you get squeezed in and then it pushes out through the body. And so it's kind of got this interesting stuff to it. And that's what craniosacral fluid therapy does, basically. It tries to make sure that pumping mechanism is properly done, and that the brain gets nurtured properly through the CSF. Anyway, it's pretty interesting. I like it a lot. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
And from there, we get into this, what you were asking about. Ooh, we got a fire somewhere over here. Or something. So when we then go further down, we get now to this corpora quadrigemini. So these are 4 little bodies. That's quadri means 4. And they are behind, sort of down a little bit. So this was here, the thalamus. And then as we looked at the cerebral, that was right here, and then the fourth ventricle was right here in front of the pons. I mean, in front of the cerebellum and in the back of the palms. And who's not muting? Who's not muting? Thank you. And then behind there, on the other side of the cerebral aqueduct, we have these 4 little bumps. And you can see them on the brain, actually, right above the cerebellum. You see these bumps. And those are the corpora quadrigemini. And so there are 4 of them, and we have 2 on the bottom, one on each side, and 2 on top of them. The ones on the bottom are known as the inferior colliculi, and the ones on the top, the superior colliculi. And what they do is they harbor reflexes. And actually, what I like about them is I can kind of understand how they work, because the superior colliculi harbors a reflex when something comes in my peripheral field of vision. And like, let's say something flies by and I can't really see it and recognize it, but I see something's happening. That superior colliculi connects to my muscles in the neck and moves my head to that place, so I can see at that object in central vision. So actually I can focus on it and see what it really is. And so that's the superior colliculi. And the inferior colliculi does the same thing, but with sound. And so if I hear something coming, bzzz, I look at it. And that's what that stimuli does, where that reflex gets initiated. So that's pretty cool, I thought. Is that sensible, or?
Yeah, no, that's it's just,
Well,
the
it
picture
sounds
that we had for coloring was
Oh.
hard.
Okay, I'll have to go through those pictures again and at some point revise that. At some point, that's on my to-do list anyway. To just do the best you can. I mean, the point is the understanding, right?
Yeah.
And even if you draw it in, just draw it in, and whenever you spend more than 2 minutes of questioning something like that, I would tell you, just do the best you can and move on.
Okay.
All right, because it's not worth it. It's really most important that it's not worth it to spend too much time between your understanding and my understanding, right? What's most important is that you understand it.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I know. Because when I look at these things, I look for, I'm grading more like trying to be a coach in creating these knowledges versus, it's not I think education's got to be a little adaptive in that way, I think. Anyway, that's just the way I look at it. I had serious test anxieties, and so I don't want to teach that way. All right, but you understand that, and so let's go on. So that was actually okay with that question then. And then from there, we move further down into what's the brainstem, or we already are in the brainstem now because we moved away from the thalamus, hypothalamus sort of area. And one of the things that's really cool in the brainstem is the reticular formation. So structurally, the brainstem composes here of the, let me see if I have a picture where it says these areas. Brainstem, where are you? Maybe it's more a region. The midbrain is around this area, right underneath the diencephalon, and then we have the pons. And the pons is a structure we can sort of identify because it's got this bulge to it. Pons means bridge. It has a lot of fibers in it, less of these nuclei things that do things, more like cables going up and down, and also into the cerebellum. And then below the pons, we have the medulla oblongata, and that's basically down in here below it. And then after that, we have the spinal cord. So when we look at the brain stem, we look at those three regions kind of that it makes it up. And one of the things that I like about the brain stem is this understanding of reticular formation, because it's a collection of nuclei that goes from along the way, from down here all the way to up here, and it works to keep the cortex alert and conscious, and modifies a brain's excitability by filtering sensory information and not let everything reach the cortex. And so this is why we can sleep. And so I thought that was pretty cool as sort of an understanding of, another functional thing that happens in the brain and where it happens. And then from there, we go to this is the cerebellum, is also interesting, because the cerebellum, we think mostly of the balancing brain. So you're thinking about, in the precentral cortex, you say like, oh, I got to turn a light switch on. Then the basal ganglia says like, I can know how to walk, so I'll walk to the light switch. But then there's a freaking pothole in the middle, and you're practically falling down on the brainstem. I mean, the basal ganglia doesn't know how to deal with that. That's when we get the cerebellum in the mix, and the cerebellum has all these reflexes connected with that then we don't fall down, but we can course correct. And so that's partly what the cerebellum does: equilibrium, muscle tone, and coordinating execution of movements, but also has to do with planning. And we now know more and more the cerebellum is involved in cognitive planning and decision making as well. So it has one of the things that I didn't say about the cerebellum is it has as many cells in the cerebellum are almost as there are in the rest of the brain. So the cerebellum is a really, really highly dense structure that does a lot of computing and all that kind of stuff, and it has to do with planning.
I'm standing on one foot now.
Good.
I do a standing desk mostly, and so when I remember, I was like, oh wait, I'll just stand on one foot and then switch.
And that I do that too. This is very good. Yesterday I took the dog and he almost wanted to go into the water in a little canal, and I'm like, maybe if I show him. So I took my shoes off and went into it. He didn't come. But then I get up and put my socks back on with one foot balancing, and this lady was walking, oh, you can go balance. I'm like, yeah, it's my exercise. Because we gotta, the more we can think of these sort of things like balancing and do them in our daily routine, that's very important because it turns on our brain. I mean, the thing is very interesting. A lot of our brain power is used to walk, to balance, to move the musculoskeletal apparatus, to move us around and to manipulate the world. So that's very important to understand because being active and moving around and not being just sitting on TV and all that stuff is a very important way to stimulate the brain, to keep the brain active, especially as we get older. That's very important to appreciate that, I think. And that balancing is those are big activities that really, really help turn on that mechanism up there in the head. Yeah. That's some cool stuff. I like the brain. And then lastly, we went to this olive, right? The olives were easy, you said?
Yes.
I know, I like the olives because
that's the only one I could identify on the brainstem.
Well, that and the model, it's even green, which is even better, right? In school, right? So it's always an easy one to recognize on a test,
Yeah.
See the brainstem thing. See here.
It's the pyramids I couldn't get.
Yeah, that's a hard one because the pyramids are just wiggles, The pyramids are, why they call them pyramids? They call them pyramids because in the precentral cortex, that where the motor stuff comes from, the cells look like upside down pyramids, like they are triangle shaped. And so then the axons from those cells are the ones that go down in his channel here. So that's the connection. And so they end up calling these the pyramids just because of that. That's why they don't look like anything in here, right? These are the pyramids right here. And what's interesting about there is the decussation that you have. So this is the area where a lot of motor activities that your right precentral cortex sends the information down to your left leg or left body, and the left side to the right body. And it's the same is true for sensation. It's just the crossing of the nerves happen not at the same place. In motor functions, the crossing of the nerves happens right here at the decussation of the pyramids, where fibers cross. So that's also an interesting point to know. That's the reason why the right brain controls the left side of the body, is that decussation. I know.
Yeah,
right?
that's weird.
Huh?
Yeah, that's weird. I mean,
it's totally weird, right? I know. I don't know why that is actually. I don't know why we do the left and right like that. I should look that up. If anybody has an idea. But it's important to do the cross crawl for our brain, although that's not because of right left, but I'm sure it has to do fundamentally because we have right and left. Cross crawl is very important to help the brain not be too scattered. All right. Silence. Are you guys all right?
Soaking it in.
Soaking it in, I know.
Yeah. But thank you for that, because whoo.
Yeah, no, I think we should just leave it at that. I don't think we should go anywhere else with the spinal cord and stuff. I think that's enough information, right?
Oh yeah, lots.
Good. Well, no, it's good to talk about these things. Also, I really like it in small groups too, because we actually get a little more into the explanation of things. It's not just, it's hard when it's just a monologue on my end.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. And this week we'll do, I think we're almost done with this. Let's see what we got this week going on. Where is it?
Yeah, now it's the spinal.
It's just, I think we're doing, spinal cord and special senses.
Yeah.
A little acuity test. We're working on the presentation, finishing up with the gratitude journal, I think. And then that's not too complex. The spinal cord is fairly straightforward. The senses are kind of cool, how you can see and how you can hear kind of fundamentally things. The seeing is, one molecule changes in a nerve cell, a receptor, which is kind of impressive. And then the hearing and balance is interesting, is it has to do with liquid bending hairs and things. So these are kind of nice chapters to just kind of understand a little bit. We'll talk about it next week.
Sorry.
That's the signal to call it bye-bye.